can there be 70 different ways to interpret Torah?
The Rebbe would break it down. First of all, there's Pardes. Pshat, Remes, Drush, and Sod, 4, which are 4 levels of interpreting Torah. And then, of course, there's Shivim Panim on Torah. And the Rebbe would often mention that it says in Kitzvei Arizal that there are actually 600,000 different interpretations to every thought and word of the Torah, based on the fact that there are 600,000 root neshamis who are all destined to learn the whole Torah of Pardes, and each one has a different spin on the Torah. This is the meaning of Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chayim. It says in the Gemara, based on Psukim, and it's explained in Chassidus, that the Torah was written in such a way that it's subject to multiple interpretation, and it's part of the divine design that it should be interpreted in all these different ways. In other words, it's not a correct and an incorrect. They're mutual correct. They're parallel truths on a certain level. And Hashem produced His wisdom in such a fashion that allows it to radiate into a variety of different forms. I'll tell you a beautiful story. That in the later years, around 86 or 87, the Rebbe began to edit his sichos regularly. And there were editorial boards that prepared the Rebbe's sichos for edition. And there was conflict. There was a group of people that prepared sichos in Yiddish for the Rebbe to edit. There was a group of people who prepared sichos in Ivrit, in Hebrew, for the Rebbe to edit. And they were competing over the Rebbe's editing time. So the Rebbe would get a sicha from both of these editorial boards every week. At a certain point, the Rebbe had them go to a Bezdin, and it was determined that they should alternate weeks. But for a year, Mem Zayin, they both were giving in sichos. So I heard that very often they would present the Rebbe with the same sicha and different understandings, and sometimes conflicted understandings. In other words, the Hebrew version or the Yiddish version of the very same sicha had the same form, the same words, but the concepts were different. And the Rebbe would edit both, and they both come out published and edited. So I heard that Rabbi Groner asked the Rebbe, I don't understand, you spoke a sicha, either this one is correct or this one is correct, how can they both be correct? And the Rebbe spontaneously responded and said, quote, Das ist emes, und das ist emes, und noch Sachen seien emes. This is true, and this is true, and if more people would write, that'd also be true. Because Torah has 70 phases, indicating that when the Rebbe spoke, the Rebbe's spoken words could have been diverged in many different directions, and they all would have been part of the major intent. The idea of one truth is only when it comes to halach. When it comes to Jewish law, there's only one emes, one truth. And the Rebbe often quotes the Pasuk and the Gemara, V'havaya ime halacha kamaise. The truth of halacha is not intellectual. In other words, the reason the law in Torah is truer than the idea of the multiple interpretations is not because the law is more logical, but because what the law is the will of God. For example, say a halacha is determined by majority. Rabbis debate, and the halacha is determined by the majority. Now, it's possible that in the minority there may be a rabbi who's intellectually superior to every rabbi in the majority. The halacha is acher rab nahates. You're following the majority opinion. So you follow the majority opinion doesn't necessarily mean that the majority opinion is logically more correct than the minority. It may be the other way around. And the Gemara gives clear examples of people like Reb Meir, who was so smart that he was always losing arguments because la yada chamam l'seif daite. So the way halacha is determined isn't necessarily by the most intellectually precise point of view. Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, everybody agreed that Beis Shammai's academy was smaller because there were higher entrance exams and the students were brighter, and the halacha is like Beis Hillel because they were in the majority, because it's the will of God. And of course in Chassidus we discuss how the will of God is beyond the wisdom of God. And God arranges that in this generation the majority should say this because it's what He wants for this generation. And for example, when Mashiach comes, we're going to turn over all the halachas and follow the Beis Shammai, like it's brought in the Kitzvei Arizal, because that will be the will of God at that time. So on an intellectual level, there's no such thing as they're all correct, unless they can be refuted. The halacha, which is singular, is more correct, but not because it's more logical, because this is the Ratzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu at that particular time and place.